all the introductions, I did forget to introduce myself. I'm Wendy Linsgood with the Alaska Railroad, serving as your Senior Vice President for RDC. So on to our program, I asked Ralph, I said, you made up that title, didn't you? And he said, well, Cruising for a Bruising was better than the Love Boat, so at any rate, Ralph Samuels is a lifelong Alaskan born in Anchorage at the Old Providence Hospital. He has lived in King Salmon, Nome, Fairbanks, Metlakatla, as well as Anchorage. Ralph is currently Vice President, Government and Community Relations for Holland America Line. Prior to working for Holland America, Ralph was employed by Penair for more than 25 years. He worked his way from loading and fueling planes to Vice President of Public Affairs. During his time there, Penair grew into the largest in-state airline in Alaska. In 1998, Ralph was named one of the initial group of Alaska's top 40 under 40 young business leaders. Ralph was elected in 2002, 2004, and 2006 to serve District 29 in the State House in the Alaska Legislature. Please help me welcome Ralph Samuels.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. We argued about the Cruising for a Bruising title for the presentation. That was mine. I take pride in that, actually. Bruce didn't like the like boat instead of love boat too much. We had a few others that probably shouldn't be repeated here in public. It's going to be hopefully a entertaining speech, but quite frankly, it's going to be rather depressing news. And what I'd appreciate doing is, those of you that probably have spent your entire careers in the tourism trade, I'm probably going to bore you to tears today, because you understand how the pieces all fit together. As a legislator and somebody who I think about myself, and I pay attention to a lot of the economics of the state, I didn't understand a lot about tourism even after 6 years in the legislature. I kind of got a general gist of how the people flowed and everything, but I'm going to try to get into detail. What's the difference between a Gulf ship? Why is Fairbanks probably the most impacted community for all these cancellations that are coming up, and how the people flow? And what I'd really like is some feedback. You can either get to Jason or to myself or to Bruce. We're trying to get out into the communities, quite frankly, over the next 6 months or so, and explain to people in 2010 what some of the consequences to their communities are. So if there's something that I'm talking too slow and it's just a no-brainer, we can take it out of this presentation as we travel across the state. If there's something that I talk too fast, let one of us know if you got something out of this. And be honest, if you didn't get something out of the breakfast this morning, if you didn't learn something, then tell me. That's fine, because we're trying to get out and educate Alaskans on tourism in 2009, and then tourism in 2010 and on into the future. I'm going to start off with just some general tourism statistics and how cruise industry plays into tourism as a whole. The cruise industry, of all the tourists that come to Alaska, all the guests that come up here, about 60% of them show up on a cruise ship. 6 out of 10. And out of the other 40%, a third of them, the 27%, originally came up on a cruise and then decided to return. They came up maybe and they did an inside passenger cruise and then decided they want to see Denali. Maybe they came up on a cruise and decided to come up on their own. They wanted to spend more time in Anchorage or Fairbanks. But a full third of those people. So you're talking about 3/4 of the visitors to Alaska, a huge number, are associated somehow with the cruise industry. And even the independent travelers, those that come up in a motorhome or come up to see their family, they've been exposed to all of the marketing efforts that not only that ATIA puts out, but also you see pictures of the glaciers and the bears and McKinley and on and on and on and on, and you'll trigger something that says, I think I'm going to go to Alaska now, even if I'm going to drive up. So what the cruise business does with all of its marketing power, as well as just being on the ship itself, and once you're off the ship, you come up again, the overwhelming influence that you have on the volume of people that visit this state and the money that flows into the communities is associated with the ships themselves. And there's another way of looking at that. The air component of people that fly up here, that doesn't include, I believe this does not include the people that fly up on a cruise to Seward or to South Central and then fly back. Those are just people that fly up to Alaska and perhaps see their family or are on their own tour. Impacts on the state,
This is from a McDowell study in 2007, $1.35 billion. We purchase $4.3 million of Alaska seafood just for the ships themselves, not counting the guests that are in the restaurants, the smoked salmon they might buy, all the products that they will purchase for the seafood. When they go back home, they might be asking for some. You know, we've reached out to the fishermen, the United Fishermen of Alaska, and we're trying to get a relationship from them to perhaps use the 1 million guests that come up on the cruise ships as people that could go to the lower 48, and when they go to their local Costco in Iowa or wherever, ask for Alaska salmon. If you get people asking for it, you could consider you'd have a million seafood salesmen if they come up here and they've had a good experience to go down there and ask for Alaska products as well. There's some other figures up there, but really the point is that the money spreads around the communities and around the state quite a bit. I've got the next 3 slides are 3 different communities from 3 different parts of the state. And I really wanted to point out the spending here and then the volume of passengers. And this first one here is for Anchorage. The bed tax revenues just from the cruise passengers is about $5.4 million. I think it's about half. That's from the McDowell study also. We get a little shy of 400,000 visitors. In 2007, the 2008 numbers were about the same. Ketchikan, closer to 900,000 visitors. And here's what they're gaining right there from just from the local taxes and from the payments for the ship docking and the moorage fees and whatnot. So we have a huge proportion in a town the size of Ketchikan of the tax revenues that drive the city services, as well as driving the private sector. We're bringing 900,000 people through their community and selling the goods and services that keep their economy going. And the third town that I wanted to point out was Fairbanks. And as I said, we're going to get into a little bit later in the presentation on the impacts, despite the fact that obviously no cruise ship pulls up to a dock on the Chena River. How come Fairbanks is probably the most impacted, in my view, probably the most impacted community on what's coming at us in 2010. And their volumes, they had about 220,000. They also collected the bed tax revenues for a proportion of them. I don't know what the proportion of the total bed tax, but I'm assuming that in Fairbanks that the summertime business has to be an overwhelming percentage of the people that are actually spending time in that community. So here are the map of Alaska, and the way that the cruise itineraries are set, it's almost as if you have 2 separate markets. The southeast market, you leave, you have Jones Act questions we won't get into, why you leave from the Canadian ports and whatnot. But you're going to leave from the Washington-Vancouver area, and one itinerary goes up, it visits the southeast communities, and comes back down. It's a 7-day tour. You spend money in all these various places. You can't get off the ship. You can't go one way. You get off the ship in the communities and spend the day, come out, and you go to the next community. So why would, if you get to visit all of these communities on a 7-day trip, why would you spend all of this extra time going over just to go to Seward? And obviously the answer is you have to pay a little bit more because we're going further. You're going to pay whatever it costs to operate the ship. And then additionally, you're going to have to fly home, so you have an extra expense to fly home. And the reality is, with all due respect to the good people of Seward or Whittier, nobody's coming up here just to see Seward and Whittier. On top of this, when they get to Seward, that's what feeds really all of the Denali traffic, all of the Fairbanks traffic, the Kenai tours that are sold. So that is just the dumping point for that person. But you have to pay, and you'll see that with the economics, if you think through the economics, you have to pay extra on the cruise itself. You have to buy the airplane ticket home. The airplane tickets have not been discounted, sorry Scott, as much as cruise fares have, although... So you're having to buy the ticket home. In order to take advantage of going to Seward and Whittier, you're spending yet again to go up to Denali or Fairbanks or Kenai. So it's not a small difference on the fares, on the cost of buying this cruise as the cost of buying this cruise. It's a completely separate animal on how we market it and why people do it, as opposed to a 7-day. And I'm going to get into what Holland America did. Holland America turned a 7-day cruise into a 14-day cruise, and one of the reasons I'll walk into what our thinking was and how it's going to impact, quite frankly, the gentleman to my right and some of the other communities here. Sorry, Scott, we're picking on you here today.